My next guest on today's podcast is Purva Aggarwal. Purva is a CEO of the company Good Piggy, which got featured in Shark Tank Season 1. And it's been a fascinating conversation to hear her story, how from India she got to London and back.
Working for the London company, I would come back and say, I want to build this, I want to build something, I want to solve this problem, etc. It makes me move. And every time my father would tell me, no, bro, you're just being restless. Don't worry, you're going to catch a flight, go back to London, you'll forget about it, right?
And how her journey from financial industry in London got her to start the company, which is focused around child literacy on financial aspects.
Sigma Square Society. And they were talking about how do you solve world problems. So, me, the biggest problem, because I was with a student loan, I was understanding what is the cost of my dreams. Pandemic was happening, money becomes crunched, right?
Yeah.
I could see that financial literacy is a huge issue which needs to be solved.
It's fascinating to hear, and more importantly, it's amazing to hear how she, as a female solo entrepreneur, has overcome all the hurdles which she did face in her journey of being an entrepreneur. And today, she's been able to successfully launch the app, which got featured in Shark Tank Season 1.
And then when we heard about Shark Tank, I think we just wanted to see whether we crossed level 1, level 2, level 3.
So without much further ado, let me get on with it. Hi Purva, welcome to Masters Decoded Season 3. Really glad to have you on the show today.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Purva, I was looking up your LinkedIn profile and it's a pretty fascinating background which you come from. I have seen you, by the way, on Shark Tank Season 1, and my family, that was one of the season which we all as a families were able to sit and watch during COVID times. We'll talk more about Shark Tank, but, getting to your journey first, being a finance graduate and postgraduate from London, how did that journey from London coming back to India happen? And why did it happen? That's the first question which has been running in my head since morning.
No, to be very honest, it was never planned, right? As any, I would say, ambitious person who sets course from, takes a flight from India to UK or to London, is to be there in that competitive zone, to, to show yourself as an ambitious person and make your mark in the holy grail of finance, right? It's a different world. It's a beautiful world in terms of how finance unfolds in the city. And, I was one of those, I think you've heard stories of people as actors or in the entertainment industry go with gleamy eyes to Bombay to make their careers. I think as finance graduates, we reach out to London or New York in terms of making that. Was my plan. I was working in private equity after doing my master's, and thoroughly enjoyed doing my master's there because, it's much more interactive. It's a lot oriented to build your research skills. You draw a lot, which takes you forward in terms of understanding what world finance is. And I think I was totally glammed up with that plethora of how, the ecosystem is globally, seeing it outside of your domestic country, interacting with different people, understanding diversity in terms of how the industry unfolds as well. And then suddenly the pandemic happened.
Okay.
Right. And the pandemic for me, I would say, was that game changer where I realized I need to be closer to parents. They need to be taken care of, for my grandfather, etc. So I requested my boss that, what can I probably work from India? When everybody's going back to their homes, home for me is not the studio apartment. It is actually home ground, New Delhi. So he was very generous, and he offered me to work on clients which were Indian based, which could offer, which could help, etc. And that's how I moved back to Delhi. I mean, for all I know, the entire pandemic, in fact, that's a really interesting story on how, nobody knew what the word pandemic is back then.
Yeah.
And my boss asked me to write a report as a research analyst on what is pandemic, what, sectors it will impact, how will our portfolio work out, and all of that stuff. And I remember as a research analyst writing a report and, referencing WHO, that, these things will come true if the international body announces it's a pandemic. And my crux of the report was it's not possible. It looks like science fiction. I don't think so. They will stop industries which are billion trillion dollars in terms of airlines, etc. Globally, things can't shut down. It's not
Yeah.
like we're going for Armageddon at all. It was a negative, right? That
Mm-hmm.
this possibility or this scenario is something which is less likely. At the moment I submitted the report, my mobile phone pinged saying WHO announces it's a pandemic. And
Ouch.
within 24 hours,
Mm-hmm.
I was reactive and I made a decision, well approved from my company, to move to Delhi, to move to India. And trust me, when I came in, there were no checks, there was no COVID issues, there was nothing where you have to declare anything. I
Yeah.
just, walked into my home. And then a week later, Delhi announced it's a pandemic and it's a shutdown, and everybody's supposed to stay home. So that's how it unfolded for me. My transition was, very reactive to research,
Okay.
and I could make the decision within globally being announced. I could be back home with my parents. So I think we
Was it
didn't
Feb
see them.
28th or 29th of?
Yeah, so no, this was March 13th exactly when
Okay.
WHO announces the pandemic globally, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when the airlines, etc., the prices were supposed to go up. I remember my price of the ticket from London to Delhi was 22,000, whereas
Wow.
everybody else who has come in lakhs, putting over in hotels, doing their quarantine and all of that bit. So yeah, I mean that's how the transition was, and I remember working for almost 10 months in India, working for my London office. And yeah, I had no clue that Good Piggy would turn out to be a startup which I would want to give full time attention to. But for almost 10 months, it was about working in the UK time zone from India.
Why finance as a career?
Hmm. It's interesting question. It makes me reflect into my personal choices, and I
Mm-hmm.
did not wanted to pursue finance, to be very honest,
Okay.
initially. My father comes from an accounting and finance background.
Hmm.
He has over 29 years of experience
Wow.
now, almost retired into this space. If you ask me, I was one of those who would be on stage, who would be vocal, who would be theatrical, who would be dancing, who
Okay.
would be leading co-curriculars. If there's an assembly, then I'm the one everybody's repeating, the prayers after and all of that bit as an MC. And so was my undergrad life, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
was working in events, in entertainment, very independent, could manage a team of 30, 40 people at an event, do international level events as a leader.
Nice.
So from there, when my father saw that, look, this little girl, she's 18 years old and she has a team of 30 people who are 26, 28, 29-year old, and she's, earning like 10, 12,000 rupees a day,
Wow.
not listening to me when I'm saying don't wear ribbed denims. Because he realized, no, I need to change course for her. And then he influenced me
Okay.
to, start interning. I remember, I was also very smart with studies. So,
Okay.
I knew I could do pick up finance. I'm doing BCom honors. Sath I was doing National Stock Exchange examinations, certifications, pretty ambitious from day zero. And once I had those papers cleared off, I joined a stockbroking firm, Alankit,
Okay.
for a very short time to understand what that scene is. Then, my father only told me this, that I want you in your undergrad to intern as much as you can in finance, figure out how hungry you are, how high you want to go in the ladder, and how widespread this entire finance industry is. So, remember going for stockbroking firms for an internship, then moving on, going into consulting, then management consulting, then international trade and finance. I remember also doing a bit in economics research, and then finally
Wow.
realizing that if I have to really, and I, almost 8 to 12 clients down the line from a consulting firm, looking at businesses in and out, doing internal process reviews, business process reviews. I understood that every company is the same, right? No matter you're in a different trade or industry, the
Yeah.
core of how the management functions is very much the same. On the outside, financialization is another aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I remember looking into an arm where management consulting would be high level decision making on where the companies collide in terms of mergers and acquisition. I realized I want to be on the top level. So for me, I remember coming back after 3 years and telling my father, what if I have to really pick this up? I definitely see myself in a much work-life balance scenario than being in the events and entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm.
Though, I mean, I would not say I knew the coolest musicians, the top charting numbers. There was no event where I needed to buy a pass. I
Okay.
would always have friends
Wow.
everywhere.
You
So
still have?
oh yes, a
Okay.
lot of celebrity friends. And yeah, that's how I came back to my father's like, no, this perhaps is I've seen both worlds, and I believe there will be a longer work-life balance in the finance field. And within finance, I know I want to be doing investment banking. And
Okay.
I think that's how the conversation started. So I think it was a very nice father who let me to explore
Okay.
passions and guided interest, and then you
That's
could
good.
make your own choices.
So, correct me if I'm wrong when I heard it right. You mentioned you had an entertainment events and entertainment company of your own where you had
No.
your, or
So I
you were
used to
just,
work with, I used to be freelancing, and I remember working with Stanford Productions,
okay.
which used to get a lot of big productions from Sony, AXN coming to India to shoot large
Mm-hmm.
fleets. So I don't know if you remember, it was an Indian format of beg, borrow, steal. So they do
Okay.
it on AXN. It's another show
Mm-hmm.
where these people come in. It's a live race. It's called Amazing Race. So I've done
Yes.
Amazing Race US, Amazing Race Canada. I've been in the production for Amazing Race Israel. From
Oh,
Amazing
wow.
Race, I remember moving to Jaipur Literature Festival, which is Asia's largest literature festival. When I
Wow.
was in London, I would just passionately help them out when JLF used to happen in London as well. Udaipur World Music Festival, where all the musicians would come in flocking. I remember doing Goa Arts Festival,
Sunburn?
which happens
Okay.
every December, where they're celebrating arts, globally. So I remember doing a lot of those things, being part of films or movies, or just being in the creative theatrical zone. Trust me, I mean, my alter part would be I would definitely. I mean, there was a part of me which wanted to, on a free time basis, join National School of Drama as well.
Oh, nice.
I will still do it when I have white hair, perhaps.
Oh, you can still do it on weekends or if you have
I'm
enough time.
sure.
So, you know, let's go forward a bit. You're
Mm-hmm.
working 10 months remotely from
Mm-hmm.
India for the
Mm-hmm.
UK based company
Mm-hmm.
which you were working with. How did the thought of the good piggy came up in your mind? You are not married at that time, correct
I
me?
am
Or
still not married,
okay, and you didn't
and
have children,
I
and
don't.
these app is targeted towards a
Mm-hmm.
child, towards the children. And we were also, when we were watching the season when your spot was aired, it was a very interesting and a novel concept. How did that idea really come up? And this is something which I really ask most of the entrepreneurs. Kahan se wo ungli aayi? Sorry if I'm saying right.
No, I think that's true. And for almost 10 months, when I was, working for the London company, I would come back and say, I want to build this, I want to build something, I want to solve this problem, etc. It makes me move. And every time my father would tell me, no, bro, you're just being restless. Don't worry, you're gonna catch a flight, go back to London, you'll forget about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the longest time, I know we are all stuck, doing chores, everybody's brooming, doing
Yeah.
utensils, there's a cooking competition happening everywhere. You pick up your phone on Instagram. And here I am brewing up with an idea, I want to solve this problem. I want to solve this problem. This is how it
But
will
how
be
did you
done.
identify this problem?
Yeah, so this also begins slightly before the pandemic. It was my parents' 25th anniversary. I was here. I was actually coming to London to visit them to celebrate,
Okay.
their 25 years. And we all planned to go out for a vacation. And I
Okay.
remember sitting very closely with my nephew. Now,
Mm-hmm.
my nephew was 4, 5 years old. I could see him, draw tantrums when we're outside. When you buy him something, he's not happy. He would come back with my phone, with Amazon card, saying, I'm getting bored. I want my Hot Wheels delivered right now here in the hills. And like, dude, you're asking to spend money. No, Amazon does not charge money. Amazon is only asking for a permission OTP code. You can just tell me that. Basically, he's asking for the CVV, right?
Yeah.
I noticed a lot about him where he was not understanding money. And then once I would explain it to him, perhaps with a story, etc., he would get it. So the
Okay.
point was that it's not his problem, it's the problem of the environment he is in. So he doesn't see money being exchanged physically. Hand to hand is the reason why this issue comes up. But that was not enough. What was, I just saw that, I reflected on it. I remember giving him a piggy bank, which I had got from London, which looked like those London telephone
Yep.
booths. He went around asking everybody to put coins in the piggy bank. Nobody had coins only to give him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So poor fellow, where does he learn those habits where we learn from a Gullak
Yeah.
about saving, about the importance of money, about, neither is anybody asking him to, take a 10 rupee note and get some grocery back
Mm-hmm.
out, right? We're all ordering it. Everybody knows how to create a card. We're in that new zone
Yeah.
where India has been transformed completely in terms of money being invisible, in terms of spends being invisible, in terms of transactions happening without even seeing or feeling the pain of a transaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which used to be part of human psychology when we have grown up and we understand money in and in. So I could see that change. But that was not enough. I remember my Japanese professor recommended me to look at Kairos.
Mm-hmm.
Kairos is a VC community, and they were, it's funded by Bill Clinton and Richard Branson and all of those folks. And they were actually bringing together very talented young people who wanted to positively impact the world.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in the pandemic we had enough time.
Yep.
Everybody was attending webinars and seminars and something like that. So was I was attending this program called
Okay.
Sigma Square Society, and they were talking about how do you solve world problems. For me, the biggest problem, because I was with a student loan, I was understanding what is the cost of my dreams. Pandemic was happening, money becomes crunched, right?
Yep.
I could see that financial literacy is a huge issue which needs to be solved in the world. And then you find that problem, and the program allows you to find and make a workable solution out of it. As it is, my background was in research as a research analyst in London. So I started researching on the topic, almost 80 pages of
Mm-hmm.
secondary research
Wow.
on where the world is going, what is happening, why this needs to build up, etc., etc., and then sharing it with the right people to get feedback. Trust me,
Mm-hmm.
when I applied for Shark Tank India, it was not the only competition where I was applying to. There were many, and my intention was never to win the competition. It was just that I'm thinking about doing something for which I have to move full time, which will be a whole lot of struggle. I just want to see if this is worth it, right?
Idea
And if we can
validation.
probably, yeah, if we can probably rank somewhere. So we ranked as a finalist in Sharjah's competition. We were covered in Switzerland, we were covered in Japan. And then when we heard about Shark Tank, I think we just wanted to see whether we crossed level one, level two, level three. Trust
Mm-hmm.
me, by this time we were just on our dining table, just a
Okay.
couple of people on Zoom on dining table talking about a problem. And suddenly you're on national television, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
understand the idea is validated. It's goddamn validated, right? And that's when I realized I have to move full time into it, because I don't want to regret in my life that what if I had not solved the problem. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's almost a year and a half to that decision. But I was really happy during the show as well that we're just 2 months old, thinking about a website, thinking about what a product should be, and here it is getting validated. Not only on the show, but even after the show, when we would get user interest, when we would get people who wanted to invest in it, who wanted to build it. So I think it was a fantastic journey in that sense.
Now, Shark Tank gave you a platform which validated the ideas from some of the great entrepreneurs who India has, which not only helps you further build on this. Now, I always say salaries are drugs. You get that drug every month in your account and you often get paid. And how did that point, like, and you have a student loan as well, and going to UK to study is not cheap. You would have had such a big loan on you. Leaving the job, starting a company, which means putting in more money, and then having a loan. How did that will came about? Okay, let's take a plunge, let's jump, right? As Reid Hoffman says, jump from the hill and then build a parachute or
Yeah.
build a plane, right? So how that first step is critical. How did that will came
So
in?
that's not a very solo step, right? And definitely for women entrepreneurs or women who are in this zone, a lot has to be about the kind of people you have around you and how they support you. So I
Yep.
think when the story is behind every successful man, there's a woman. I think behind a successful woman or an enterprising woman, if not successful, there are many men who are there as mentors, right? So I remember not just the validation helping you and rigorous validation. Trust me, if it's a
Yeah.
man, in somebody just saying, yeah, yeah, go for it, they will probably jump down the hill and say, let's go for it. But if it's a woman who's taking a decision, trust me, she is making sure it is 110 times X much more verified and
Yep.
validated before taking that step. So that was the case. Remember, I mean, as an entrepreneur, I needed national validation. Just a few folks around me saying, build it, or
Yeah.
angels putting money was not enough. It was only enough when you had India talk to you about it, saying
Yeah.
build this, right? The second part is, I would say it was also destined in a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting way, because when I moved in the pandemic to be closer to my parents, and I was working in London, there was a merit because I was getting the currency trade off, right?
Yeah.
This was one of the reasons why I also took that decision, because when I made that report, I could see that currency would go up and all of that stuff will happen. That was part of the report I submitted to my boss, which said negative, it won't be possible, but it had reactions of what the world would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that there is no point being in London paying off that huge rent where you could be in India and save off those bucks.
Yeah.
So a lot of that happened because I was in the pandemic living with my parents, not paying that rent and saving that money. So for me, every rupee that I was sorry, every pound that I was earning, when I would bring it to India, it was 100 rupees, right?
Yeah.
So there was
Now
a
it's cheaper.
multiplier effect
Yeah.
where at a time when money is becoming scarce for everybody, I
Mm-hmm.
was at least in a position to take advantage of the country currency, trade-off.
Yeah.
So that helped me a lot of money where it could multiply and I could reinvest it in the business, invest it into what I'm doing. And the second thing I think is a lot which comes from my father,
Mm-hmm.
where he decided that with his business, it was hit by pandemic, and there was
Mm-hmm.
a reason where he would wanted to call for retirement, and a lot of his pension fund, I would say, a lot of his retirement fund went into helping me pay off a decent amount of my student loan.
Good
So
for him.
definitely I think it's a lot of him investing
Mm-hmm.
in me, perhaps, to make sure that this goes out well. So I think a lot of it was that it also came from credible angels who helped us to support. It came
Yeah.
from business partners who said, okay, we will be expensing a considerable chunk in comp of to the equity. So I think a lot of people who help you stand up in that journey. So I think, yeah, that is how it has been so far. And then there was India, right, who saw you, who understood you, people who wanted to work with you. Almost 150 people wrote down their names on the website saying they would like to invest in this startup.
Oh,
Trust
wow.
me, my people started phoning me. People were calling me. There were people from Gujarat, people from Maharashtra, people who had IT companies straight away offering me, just write off this idea to us. We'll pay you XYZ. I mean, there's a whole lot of storm that comes to an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you are just starting out,
Yeah.
and you don't have your feet in the business. That happens. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a lot. I think a lot of people who put their bets on what
So
we're
how
doing.
did you overcome the urge, right? I'm sure there would have been an urge. Oh, somebody's offering you big money to just sell the idea and move off. And you can go on to building something again,
Yeah.
something bigger, right? So,
We had somebody who said, we'll give you 200 crores, we'll pump in 200 crores in the business, right? I wish somebody says that to me right now. I will happily accept
okay.
after running the business after a year.
Yeah.
But when you're just starting out on your dining table, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then somebody offering you like 200 crores, 50 crores, this, that, all that kind of stuff, it makes you suspicious. It makes you like, there's that effect which we call is too good to be true,
Yes.
right? And then there's a effect where, okay, did I really do this? You're doubting yourself. Is this really possible? I mean, all of that stuff happens. It's also I mean, there were also times where you can also be frauded in that stuff, right? So I
Yep.
remember people coming and telling us that, I won't name the company, but there's a big company, big education player. We have been a co-founder on their table, and then that company got acquired by another big company. So I made my exit. I have a lot of money. Why don't you come and meet me at this hotel? And everything is sounding great. The person is absolutely correct, but when you ask for their documents before the meeting, they're hesitant about sharing their documents, right? When you go and validate this on the government website with respect to a DIN number, etc., the entire claims you make were false, right? And then you understand, oh my God, this could be a trap where. So there's a requirement, and I've been very vocal about it, for female founders to have institutional money, because if you're not looking for institutional money, it can get really crazy, right? So you
Yeah.
need to be very. I remember going for meetings and I'm feeling uncomfortable about these people. There's an intuition about, no, it's not correct, and then perhaps telling your father, if you could join me, or perhaps if inviting them somewhere where you are comfortable, not following where they would come, be. There are all sorts of ruckus that happen with the entrepreneur. And I have faced multiple challenges of those. Very less people speak about it, but it's very important to also be vocalized on that area.
Yeah.
Where I also remember once where somebody offered us a huge check
Okay.
and claimed that they were part of a big company, and I reached out to that company's founder
Okay.
on LinkedIn,
Okay.
like randomly. I've not even connected to that person, right? So you could still drop them an email
Yes.
saying,
Email.
"Hey, I heard something about this guy being on your cap table, finding an exit, and now wanting to invest so and so money in my business." And people are very good. When you ask for help, he called him back. Sorry, I don't even know this person, right? So he's absolutely frauding you. So there's a whole lot of storm that goes by, right? And you need to be vigilant. You need to have the right people to guide you, to validate you, to look through those deals, and then you need your own due diligence before you get swayed into it, right?
Yeah.
So
And unfortunately, for whether it's business or personal life, right, there are these bad actors who kind of muddle the waters.
mhm.
And many a times the true actors get avoided or do not participate or do not get the seat at the table because the bad actors in your case, they have created these perceptions for you which make you wary and make you cautious about every step you take. And that's so unfortunate. And hopefully, people are listening, and like you said, female entrepreneurs specifically need a coach. I would use that word
Not
along
as a
the
coach,
journey.
but at least definitely a coach, a mentor. You need your own protection, your legal protection. You also, there's a huge learning curve, right?
Hmm.
Where although I'm from finance industry, although I was in investment banking, although my job was to help family businesses marry to a startup in the UK, when you're on the table of being an entrepreneur, it's a different side.
Yeah.
Tables always turn, and that's a new learning curve altogether. So there's a huge learning curve as well, where either you learn yourself or you rely on somebody else to take care of those things, right? Either or sort of a scenario. But it's very important. It's also important that one of the biggest things is when you're raising money, you know who you're raising for, from, what you're doing. If you're partnering up with people, then you're actually doing your correct due diligences. And Yeah, I mean, having institutional funds
Hmm.
could be a better situation, I would say, as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
because a lot of this was coming from an investor community, because that the founder is in a gullible space. And it could equally be for a man. It's like gender agnostic as
Yeah.
an experience. But having institutional capital not only helps you in this sense, but also in the sense of corporate governance being strong in
Hmm.
companies, right?
Yeah.
So I remember in all of this stuff, I was really like, okay, who do we really trust, right? We have lots of offers, but where do you take this? And I remember just going back to friends and family. I said, look, this capital I know is good, it's decent, we know it's who is coming from, it helps us move on. But again, doing a friends and family round and doing all of that bit, I still feel that I'm also transitioning towards now institutional capital. There's a whole lot of difference when it comes to demands of corporate governance
Yeah.
in both kind of injections in your business.
Now, when you know, from that time when you were at Shark Tank, you were like just 2 months old. You was still trying to get your app and your website and everything up to where you are today. In the space which you are in, people do often ask you a question: what's your MAU and what's your DAO, right? So, what's your monthly active users or what's your daily active? So, where is that count now from where you were?
Mm-hmm. So the moment we pitched this idea to the world, we had almost 4 to 5 thousand people who came up on the website saying we would like this, right? And to be honest, if I would scream it down, some people who were just curious, some people who did not even have parents. I remember one day just sitting down, saying, "I'm going to call every one of that person today and thank them for putting their names out and just hear them out and what interests them, etc., and start learning about my customers." Trust me, within a few phone numbers, I realized that there was somebody from Jharkhand, somebody from Rajasthan, somebody from a Bangalore, somebody who was just a business partner, somebody who was just curious, somebody didn't even have a kid, but maybe
Okay.
for their nephew. So there's all sorts of people who believe that this product should come live. Though it was, with that interest, we could go to investors and saying that, look, there is a demand of this product. There
Hmm.
is an intention where users want this as a service or want this as a problem that needs to be solved. From there, it took us a year to build what we built as a minimum viable product. Also, in between, do a couple of events, meet our customers, understand more about them, create a community. So we went into a community-led growth model. We have
Okay.
almost, I would say, 7 to 8,000 folks in our community right now.
Nice.
In terms of and those are people who are getting our active emails. We often reach out to them over WhatsApp. We keep inviting them to events, physical events that have been restricted right now to Delhi NCR. We yet are not in a position to go out in terms of a pan India approach. But in terms of the app recently came out on Android in
Okay.
January. We have not spent on any marketing dollars. Touchwood, and thanks to Shark Tank and the traction we have received and the love we keep receiving, there is a buzz and there is an interest that comes in from podcasts. There's a buzz that and interest that comes in from YouTubers. So we keep controlling our marketing spend, and we have somewhere around 2,500 users who have downloaded the app. A couple
Okay.
of those who are using it. Thanks to a lot of them, we could find out a lot of bugs which we have been able to fix. And we are continuously understanding and monitoring that data, and now the company is actually or I would say on a roadmap to reiterate that product completely.
Okay.
So we know where we could improve. We know where we could, we so our assumptions are technically tested, and we know where to go. So in terms of a new revamp coming up, we have, I would say, started coding it. So
Okay.
another few months, you would see a new version out. Though from Android, we are also launching the same Android product on Apple as well within this
Okay.
week. And I think on that scenario, the MVP will have a traction of, and our target is to have 5 to 7,000 people download that product, check how, or how much we could validate our assumptions and import those into the reiterated product
Nice.
mid-year.
Nice. Now, when I look at you, right, you having a finance background, getting into an ed tech, come child tech, come fintech business, the tech aspect, to complement your skills from a finance and from an education perspective, what was your experience been to hire a CTO, come a tech
Right.
person to ensure? And I've been through my own personal journeys, and I can understand how difficult it can be to get the right tech person and the tech ecosystem, because it can get very easily out of space, right, for you and for anybody.
Correct. It's very important to have technology by your side, though it's not very cheap anymore, right?
Yeah.
The world used to outsource to India, where I think we're becoming very competitive in terms of what that demands. There's a whole new world of smaller countries now also developing this technology outsourcing area globally perspective. But if you ask my personal journey with Good Piggy, initially we showed this off to a venture builder who could help build his, bring his resources and build an MVP which could be tested. Though I think we ran too fast,
Okay.
too fast, where because we were on Shark Tank, this stuff needed like roller coasters, right?
Yes.
So ideally, MVPs would be like forms, would be smaller stuff that you can do to validate. But suddenly here there was users who wanted a product in their hand, right? So
Hmm.
we were actually trying to jump or fast track that entire process into rapid, answering. So there was a venture builder who helped us build MVP, but I think outsourcing a product to a partner to build might not be the best decision. And if you ask me, I mean, uh, there's a whole issue, right, where they would not want to involve so many resources. You have your own speed in terms of business. Matching that delivery standard becomes very difficult. Also, as a non-tech founder, signing off stuff that you want in technology also becomes very difficult, because when a technical
Agreed.
person technically comes into your zone and looks at what you have signed off, can take out a lot of mistakes in it, because you're signing off stuff or asking requirements from a non-technical aspect, right? So there's
Yep.
a whole lot which is behind that non-technical aspect which needs to be technically done. And so it's merit, I would say, to start with somebody who knows technology. Though for Good Piggy that was not the case. But having said so, every entrepreneur needs their own time to build that team, right?
Hmm.
um, Again, we were pushed to be on roller coasters. But if you were a founder who's getting into this scenario, for you to find your co-founders, it is a general curve of 6 to 8 months,
Yeah.
where you will sit, you will talk to people, you'll convince them, you will find out, you will work together, etc. But when you're on national television in 2 months, that time is not there for you, right? You know,
Yep.
you can't take 6 months to find somebody. So over time, we found somebody who could be our tech lead. He was working in a leading bank and, you know, kind of helping us out as an advisor, consultant, etc., to take delivery from this outsourcing company. And then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you realize that there's a whole lot of technological requirements that that person can add to that outsourcing company, and then that gap comes in place where your expectations now have risen because you're speaking the language,
Yeah.
and the outsourcing company who is building your product would be resource defensive in that
Mm-hmm.
situation. So that was our story. We then invested in a team who could test the delivery
Yeah.
from the outsourcing company. We also understood in that scenario a lot of the stacks that the company puts in to bring in speed, right? And then you need to substitute those stacks so that your IP is entirely yours.
Yeah.
So we've done that process, and the product that is there out in the market right now is a product we received from that company, and we have internalized in terms of our IP. But now, when you have your own team of your own product, your own UX, your own developers, your own DevOps, when you have that team entirely, is when you can start checking those assumptions, validating it, and creating something which would be closer to a fit to the user's problem. So I think
Okay.
that has been our curve, where, of course, raising funds definitely helps paying off those salaries. It's not easy to pay off a tech team. I realize that, right? It's an expensive job to have that minimum team with you. Second thing that I've also learned is a lot of companies and startups do not want to immediately have such heavy cost resources on your
Mm-hmm.
payroll, right? Because that's a responsibility of keeping people on your payroll when you are with limited runway. So on that note, I think we ended up taking people on, taking up people who could be loan staff to you as
Yeah.
resources. That itself becomes very expensive, and we
Mm-hmm.
understood the kind of extra expense you end up paying. So there was a discovery for us as well, where, somebody who would, who we are paying off, let's say in terms of a huge number,
Mm-hmm.
the end person is actually getting,
A
one
meager
fourth
amount.
that
Yeah.
cost. Yeah, a really small amount. So over time, I think we've had those experiences of technology, and we've understood that it's better to keep at least tech folks on your salary, keep that architecture lean, and then, use contracts to help create some sort of sponge for yourself as a company.
Now, Purva, but these discovery cost you money as a founder, right? And it all depends upon the network of the angels or the investor which you have, which will allow you to experiment and fail. And that failure will cost money. How's those conversations? If it is confidential, you can skip it. But I just want to know, because I'm sure a lot of other founders will be wondering, can I take that
Yeah.
plunge? Can I take
Yeah.
that experiment? Because these experiments will cost money, right?
Experiments definitely cost money. Again, when you talk about institutional investors, you will generally see, and that's what I recommend highly, that they would have you first sign off a strategy, right? There's an approach towards experiments. It's a well guided approach. It's an approach which is together signed off.
Yeah.
And then if there is learning, and if there is discovery, and there is and which is inevitable, right? It is
Mm-hmm.
inevitable that you will not have learning. Um, it definitely is commonly agreed as a learning.
Yeah.
The second aspect is, if you're not having that sort of an approach where you together understand what you want to achieve, etc., and you're going with the flow, which a lot of founders happen to do because it's a dynamic situation that you're facing, right?
Yeah.
I think it is on the investors, it is on the people who are with you, even on the high level management, who has to agree on making those mistakes. Now, have I made mistakes? I'm sure I have, but how has been the investors? Again, investors also have this, if it's not institutional investors, they have a urgency of bringing return on their investment, right?
Yep.
It's very less that you find patient investors, and it's also, speaking the investors language as well, it is also a, high risk investment that they're looking at when they're investing in startups. So I think a word of caution for all investors: to know that when they're putting off money, they're putting off money for that experiment to happen. They're putting off money for innovation to come up. From a investor's point of view, it is to understand that very logically, and I've been able to help my investor also understand this very logically, that boss, when you're putting in money in a company, that money is not being put that it will run indefinitely, right?
Yeah.
It will work out for an X amount of months, years, whatever that time frame is. And for you to understand what return you're getting, where this is going, what is happening, etc., etc., you have to understand what that time frame is and what the scenarios within that time frame can be,
Yeah.
and then look at it, right? So again, from an early stage company's point of view, if you're investing in that early stage venture, you have to understand that that money will last, let's say, 8 months or 10 months or 12 months at max, and what are the different scenarios that the startup will go through within those 12 months to ascertain what return that you will get,
Mm.
right? And of course, mistakes can sometimes be very costly. I think honesty definitely helps. I've been very honest with my investors. In fact, not just that, Good Piggy from day zero has adopted a strategy where anybody who showed us investor interest, anyone who I have met personally, have always been reported back to on a quarterly basis, right?
Okay.
So we have a bunch of 200 investors per se as a bank who we quarterly report to, even if they have invested or not invested in the startup, just to
Nice.
make sure that they have interest or they can keep tab of what they didn't invest in, right? And world is very small. I firmly believe that it's a really small world. We end up meeting each other again and again in different circumstances and situations, and it's very important for a startup to make sure that those folks who ever wanted to help you out and to stand by you also know your progress and journey, right? Not just the ones who've actually invested in you. So, of course, the level of communication and the information you declare to both parties will be very different. But I think a common dialogue or a one-on-one dialogue is very important, even if it's not reciprocated to.
Yeah.
I have always realized people always are reading those emails. They're always reading that report or post or whatever that is,
Hmm.
in terms of whatever communication channel we are choosing. But it's important to keep that loop, right? Because again, the world is very small and you will see that ripple effect in business.
Yeah. Now, pivoting a little bit to a very different topic, which is the business which you are focused on, which is the ed tech and the fintech, and more importantly, focused towards child as a category. Now, there are three dimensions to this which I want to kind of double click on. First is the target user group, which is your child. Now, a child may not be exposed to ads, may not be aware about the app itself until unless they have seen the show or their parents compel them. Now, here comes the main important piece, which is parents. You have to influence both, right? Now, as a parent, I can tell you, I do, like today while I'm talking to you, there's been a thought, and I'll be all in transparent that we just celebrated Ramadan. And in Ramadan, I'm sure you've heard about EDs, which
Yes.
every child get. And my children have been like very happy that they've collected money. And I've been thinking, okay, I don't want them. It's okay, it's their money, right? They can do what they want, but I want them to learn good practices about money. And now, like while we were talking, I was just thinking, okay, should I ask them, like, just as a summer project, ask them to make their own piggy bank and put money in so that they can start saving money. And with that perception, when you save money, you don't look at it, and when you have need, you can always open it up and see what the impact is, right, of what you've done. That's one perspective. But how do you convince both? Because both parties need to play an equal role here, the child as well as the parent. So how do you ensure that both are equally motivated throughout the journey?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, very valid question. And it's one of the biggest challenges, right, for a startup to speak both languages of the child and of the parent, make
Yeah.
that center meet. And this is the role of perception right now, which comes in play. Often not, we want children to do something and they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do it because it's coming from you. But if you just gamify that conversation, suddenly you will see that interest spark up, right? And money as a conversation is a very, very burdening topic for an adult to have, right? We're always running after it. We're trying to make ends meet. We're in that rat race, and it's not a comfortable conversation to have perhaps with a child, because you're often not pushed to think, यार बच्चे का innocence,
Yeah.
अभी बड़े होके तो करना ही है. What is the point of all of this and all of that? On the other hand, if you just gamify this conversation, like you said, as a summer project, right? Or just say, let's just do it as an exercise, or let's just do
Mm-hmm.
it for you to unlock something that could be, perhaps, a treat at McDonald's or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Now, suddenly, you've just made it so simple and like a game that they're interested in it. When we were brand wrapping Good Piggy, those were the conversations. What it should be, should it be, what color it should be, what brand feel it should give, and we're like, okay, maybe this, if it has to really speak the language not of teenagers but of pre-teenagers, then it has to be gamified. There should be a cartoon, there should be a character which looks like a piggy bank,
Mm.
or could be a piggy bank manager, somebody like that who you could associate to, and who is talking about money, maybe like an Uncle Scrooge, or
Yeah.
somebody who could be that wisdom giver for you, who's still chill. So we brought up bright colors in the app. We made sure that the app doesn't look like a banking app. It looks like a game. It has those interactions where you could pull stuff out. We are still working on a lot of interactions in the new
Mm-hmm.
product. MVP, we could not do it because there was a restriction of how much you can invest in terms of verifying your assumptions as a
Yeah.
game. But now that we are looking at, okay, if your phone is moving, can you hear the coins?
Mm-hmm.
Or for that matter, we're trying to experiment stuff like gamification to happen, the feel of how audio plays in terms of experience for the child. A lot of games that we can add. We are trying to also look into AI to help us build a
Nice.
bank tour
Mm-hmm.
for kids, right? So they, a lot of children don't end up understanding, what to do in a bank. I remember myself, I was so clueless. What is a deposit slip? What is the so
Yeah.
perhaps
All
maybe
of
just
us.
gamifying that entire banking experience into a virtual reality tour, etc. So those are the kind of stuff that we are looking at to add as elements in Good Picky. So gamification is, I think, for the child.
Nice.
Though for the parent, it's very different.
Yeah.
For the parent, we understand parents are busy. They don't have time. Like they want something, it should be an easy affair. They should be, they don't want to ignore the money topic, right? Because these are very different money values, right?
Yeah.
We understood that Gujju folk might want to train their child very differently with money perception versus, let's say, a Punjabi looking at money is very different versus, let's say, somebody in a Kolkata is very, so money actually, geography to geography also in India,
There's a
or
psychology of
culture to
money, right?
culture, yeah, culture to culture, ethnicity to ethnicity, it keeps changing, right? It is
Yes.
so varied that we can't make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of approval systems, control systems, transparency has to be in the hand of the parent to be able to customize. So I think those conversations have been very constant conversations in the product room, in the innovation room, that how do we make sure that we're able. So right now, Good Piggy has two interfaces. One is the interface of the parent, one is the interface of the kid. The kid
Nice.
experience is very different. The interface for the parent is very different. For the parent, it's a no-brainer, like a financial app, simple as that, right? For the child, it's like a game. In terms of how both the modules speak to each other, how often the parent gets nudged in their busy day, what stuff they want to be nudged on. So we leave those things for the parent to customize. So
Okay.
largely my thought has been that we should give control and transparency in the hands of the parent, because in the end, parenting is not one size fit all at all. So it should be a customizable experience for the child.
Okay.
Right now, those customizations is something that you can do actively as a parent. It can be a concierge help that you can take from us. It could be part of a demo session where we could help you walk through it. But ideally, once you have that customization done for the kid, then kid can experience that entire, I would say, learning curve in their
Mm-hmm.
own manner and fashion with you. And the app should be, an enabler for parents to sit down on the dinner table conversation and have the conversation of money, then run away from it. So
Nice.
that's the intention. The intention also is to make sure that while kids enjoy it, and they, for example, like you said, there's already a QR code system where your kids could probably show you that QR code. You could deposit the
Yeah.
Ramadan money directly into the piggy bank, and then they could make decisions on how to budget, what they're budgeting for. We're also now trying to experiment with assisted thinking, where we force the child to think about consumption, that, you know what, compulsorily choose whether this is your need or want.
Okay.
Now, that can be subjective to the parent, and the
Mm-hmm.
parent can have that conversation with you to
Nice.
go and change it. So, for example, you want the third pair of shoes. Is it your need? It's your want. Well, if
Yes.
you're marking it as a need, the parent needs to know that you're marking it as a need, and then it's the parent's responsibility to explain you why this is your need, or if it is your want, or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
conversation is, right? But let's say if you have a basket, can you see that 70% of our basket is on my wants, right? So
Yeah.
we're just trying to start training children on how to look at experiences when it comes to consumption, when it comes to saving or spending digitally. And I think that is the thought. I think although the company will merit if kids can spend, right? Because we earn
Nice.
commissions on spending,
Yeah.
we don't charge on any transactions. But unfortunately, I think I really want to make it balanced, right? Where we want to make sure the child is first thinking before making that expense. We're also trying to work whether we could start co-investments where, as a parent, you can, right now, you don't tell your child the kind of savings you're doing for them.
Yeah.
But if you choose to, you can declare it to your child. And suddenly your child can know that, my dad is running an RD
Yeah.
for my education. And you can ask your child also, do you want to participate in it? Now, for
Mm.
you, that $10 will not make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
but it will make a difference that the child is learning to put a bit of his Ramadan money
Yeah.
into education with you.
Nice.
So I think it just makes a healthier financial relationship
Mm-hmm.
between parents and children, and hopefully can make it a easy conversation, right? Where,
Yeah.
we can take the stress away from those conversations.
Now, getting into the fintech aspect, which was the third piece, the second piece. Now you do have banks, which basically, like you said, every parent has a child account, right? They're saving money and all of that. And today, interestingly, schools have started forcing, I would use that word, forcing for a parent to have a joint account. And interestingly, at least in Maharashtra, I'm not following the other states, especially in Maharashtra, a parent, and especially the mother parent, has to have a joint account with the child, not the father, right? Which is a very interesting move. Now, like my children, when they were going to the fifth grade, they were asked to create a joint account. Now you have banks, which are doing this, and then you have Good Piggy. You're almost competing with them in many ways. How do you play that up?
Yeah, it's no surprise that Maharashtra is doing this, and I think it's a really healthy move as well, because at least, I mean, whichever parent, but it's about money being allocated towards the child financial security. Also, it encourages savings in society itself, and I think
Yes.
that's really healthy. Um, but I think, looking at it from the point of view that are we competing with banks or not? Well, my point of view is very simple. It's a blue ocean completely, from the fact that India today has the largest number of children in the world, right? It
Yeah.
used to be China, India, Indonesia, but I think we're just surpassing China now. We are the youngest population in the world. And,
Mm-hmm.
talking about Indian population, one third of our population is under the age of 14,
Yep.
right? And what does the bank have to offer them? Is a
Nothing.
child saving account, right? And good for schools to enable the usage of a child saving account. But are we competing with it? Perhaps from an area that our child saving account really child friendly.
No, they are not.
So and all of them are designed to have a guardian. So that's the reason why they're asking for a joint account in schools. Well, Good Piggy has the same DNA as well. We are not leaving children to make any decisions on the app themselves. It has
Mm-hmm.
to be approved by the parent, unless until the parent chooses not to approve it and gives an auto approval, right? So, largely speaking, it's absolutely resembling the DNA of the child saving account. The only difference there is that we are just making sure that the experience is child friendly,
Mm-hmm.
the experience is contributing to make sure the child is developing those life skills in their mind, as cognitive building, and to make sure that the parent is also enjoying it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not forced, as you say, but is empowered
Okay.
as a conversation for you to take or choose. So I think, definitely I've been asking the banks that is it possible that we could create an interface where at least money in Good Piggy can be moved into the child saving account, etc. Those are things that take its own due course of time to
Yep.
work with banks. But is it in our product vision? Definitely it is. And hopefully that can also be an enabler then for the bank,
Yeah.
where we are kind of, while they're collecting that money in the child saving account, we are making sure that we're giving an interface to children and parents, which can hopefully make it much more fun, much more learning, much more value addition in terms of a proposition, and then work with the bank as allies.
Nice. Now, I'll not get into the regulatory aspect because this conversation then can go on for an hour in terms of how are you managing that. But the third aspect is the edtech. Now, you did speak about that you were approached by a so-called edtech, which was not an edtech company. But edtech as an industry is facing a very interesting, I would say they have a lot of headwinds, right? We recently had a lot of news about major tech players, especially in India, facing a lot of devaluation or valuation being reduced. Now you have this fun and interesting aspect of ed and fin coming together. What do you see as the future of it? Piggy, good Piggy, right? Really, is it going to more till, because if you're going to tie with the banks, it will be more about education and management than actually being a financial institution. So how would that play out?
Yeah. Um, See, I mean, talking about what is happening in the industry for education, I think it was getting saturated. There is
Yes.
a bubble that is there. I also stand for, if personally asking me, I definitely believe that the entire education bubble that was being created by technology in India was also condemning the national standards that we have
Mm-hmm.
of education, right? So the national infrastructure technically was being scavenged by these education players, where instead of building on that national merit or the system there, we were trying to create alternatives and expensive alternatives
Yeah.
of making sure that the Indian students or the young youth of India is at power with the world. On the contrary, I think regulatory wise or policy wise, we or on a country scenario, we should have rather invested those dollars to infuse those innovations within the system,
Yeah.
right? So at least as national merit, we could actually scale up our HR, scale up our human resource to be at power of the world. But that's an ideal scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Economics and reality is very different. In terms of what Good Picky does, if it takes that banking route where we are enabling families to be, financially secure, I think it has to be a healthy balance, right? It has to be a healthy balance where schools, for example, we are going to schools to spread young, financial literacy for young adults as well, in
Nice.
terms of workshops, in terms of academic approach, in terms of making sure that hey, you're 16, 17. I know you will be turning 18. Do you know these basics? Do you know you could freelance but to earn money, but if you're freelancing to earn money, there's actually a concept of invoicing, there's a
Yeah.
concept of TDS being there, or if you are actually thinking about doing a job, do you know what form 16 will be? I mean, nobody has had those conversations ever, but that's life skills, and you
Yeah.
suddenly learn that when you're pushed into the pool that you need to swim now.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do those sessions, those awareness sessions as well. Now idea is that you know where do we go? Do we take this route or that? I definitely feel there should be a blended approach in the business, and we should take best of both, because in the end, and we've had this survey as well. I asked 87 children this
Okay.
question, that you do, first of all, do you need this education? The answer was yes. Then we asked, where are you seeking this education from? And they
Mm-hmm.
said that they are self-learning from
YouTube.
influencers.
Okay.
Now, then my second question to them was, and this is all data backed. We actually ran a type form with these questions in a workshop. That, do you think these influencers are accountable? The answer was no,
Hmm.
right? And do you think you should listen to them? Then the answer was no. Then we asked, okay, then who should do this conversation for you? Should it be the parents? Should it be the school? And the answer was 50-50. Should it be yourself? So most of them said maybe the school. Some people said it should be our parents, right? So we went back to the school. We said, okay, you know what? So half of your students think school should have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And the school said, no, but you know what? Every parent is coming from a different background. Every family is in a different situation. So how can we standardize this education? We believe it should be the parents' call. So then we went back to the parents. We said, look, the school does not take responsibility. A child needs to learn this. If they, half of them believe it should be the parent who's doing it. And
Yeah.
then they're like, we don't know how to do it. You know, we
Hmm.
don't have time to do it. Or, you know, we are not specialized to do it. Or,
Yeah.
you know, it's not important. वो सीख जाएगा, हमने भी सीखा है. Or, you know, we've learned it. Or something like this. Also, there was a whole thing where, you know, yeah, my girl doesn't need to do it.
Yeah.
Father will take care of it. Brother will take care of it, right? So we saw those complications coming across, and we knew that it has to be a blended approach. It has to be a
Mm-hmm.
blended approach where education institutions, education tools, as well as, you know, then actually practically marrying it to real life. But
Mm-hmm.
theory is not important. That experience of actually practically doing it is also important, right? So what Good Piggy ended up picking in terms of early strategy was very simple, that we create tools which can give that experience,
Okay.
which can give that learning. So it's experiential learning when you're using the app. It's experiential learning when you're actually making that FD with your parent, or you know, participating in your SIP with, or you know, helping your parent doing that saving for you and for your life, and also taking that learning in that curve. So there is an experiential learning, and everything else which has to be theoretical, which has to be education, are content properties which help you, you know, taking that experience. So it has
Mm-hmm.
to be a blended approach, where, if I can say, awareness or marketing activity or all of those content properties become that education theory. So right now, Good Piggy is actually running storytelling sessions. It is happening for the second time. We did it in winters this
Nice.
year. We're repeating it in summers, where young kids, okay, I'm talking about 4 years to 10 years old, are coming
Wow.
in, and it's not. It's like Panchtantra. It's like fables and story, you know, fantasy and a dragon coming in, and all of that kind of fun stuff happening. And over time, you're learning what is a market, what is a producer, what is a consumer, what are consumer rights, you know, or what is cryptocurrency, what is the role of government, what is
Nice.
banking, what is fraudulent activities, or you know, as simple as how do I save, what is interest, what is compound interest, all of that through a storytelling session, right? And that's done live by a
Okay.
storyteller. It brings in the creativity of the child. She asks question that you choose what the character will do, you know. So it's really fun. It's not just financial education, it's also, you know, emotional learning, social learning, creativity that comes into place. And there you have a conversation. Once you've had that conversation, in winters, parents came and told me that, you know, so far my child was asking me for, you know, a new I don't know, some video game or something like this, but now he's asking me, why don't we get an FD? So I'm
Okay.
really happy, and I'm going for the FD because it's better money put to use, right?
Yeah.
So I was really happy as a founder that, you know, stories could make sure that the child could ask for it. But
Yeah.
the second question that the parent had was, how do I take him to, you know,
A
a bank
bank.
or an app or whatever, and show him how the FD is happening, right? It's not, you know, it's really boring. He will not feel the fun of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we realized, that it needs to be a married experience.
This conversation can continue, but I do have few last rapid fires for you,
Yep.
which probably will kind of sum up this entire conversation. Favorite Shark Tank or Shark, I would say.
Favorite shark is Namita Thapar. I'll tell you why, because she also reached out to us after the show. She is
Okay.
there on my WhatsApp. I ask her a question. I know for sure she will reply. I don't disturb her.
Okay.
But yeah,
Nice.
she is who she is, in and out, on show, off show.
One thing you will change if you have to go back into the time machine to start Good Piggy.
Partnerships. I would choose better partners. I would not make the tech mistake.
Okay. Going back to London or staying in India?
Oh, very dicey. I think, don't know. Be in a flight like Priyanka Chopra. I don't know.
Nice. And the last question, where is Good Piggy going to?
So I think Good Picky is going to reach customers. I think that is our intention completely. And as long as we are closer to that, everything else will be solved over time.
Okay. Now, Purva, this has been an amazing conversation. It was fun to dissect your journey and understand your perspectives, and hopefully the listeners will get to learn. And more importantly, my intention was a lot of solo female entrepreneurs, go through variety of journeys. I had few of them already on the show in the previous seasons and this season as well. and hopefully, lot people learn from what you've been through and share back with you.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't stand on pedestals at all. And my intention is to make it as transparent and let people know that there are struggles, there are mistakes,
Mhm.
there are things that happen, and then there is that entire love and that passion which keeps you going. And I think that's where we operate from as a team in Good Piggy.
Thank you for your time, Purva. It's been a fun conversation, and
My
best of
pleasure.
luck with your
I
journey.
hope your listeners enjoyed, or people who are watching enjoyed this conversation. And at all, I'm very approachable. So if they have anything else that they would like to cross question, ask on, I would be very happy to answer, even in the
Sure.
comment section.
I will definitely leave your LinkedIn link and probably your Twitter link if you are on Twitter so that people can reach out to you as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Purva.
Have a lovely day, guys.